Welcome back. There are new signs today that inflation remains a threat to the U.S. economy as President Trump's sweeping tariffs take hold.
It is time for a little money, power, politics.
The Labor Department published new numbers on U.S. wholesale prices today. And spoiler, they are much higher than expected.
America's debt clock never stops ticking. Every passing second adds millions to a mountain that has already climbed beyond $35 trillion. The numbers grow faster than the nation can breathe, reflecting a system straining under its own weight. Behind the statistics lies a country fraying at the edges, cities cutting back basic services, hospitals shuttering, schools losing teachers, and families wondering how long they can endure. Warning signs flash across the map, from collapsing infrastructure to hollowed-out communities. If the economy stumbles again, who is ready to absorb the shock? And which states will crumble first when the foundation finally gives way? West Virginia stands as the most haunting portrait of decline, a slow-motion unraveling that reveals what happens when an economy built on one industry fades. Once the proud center of America's coal empire, the state powered cities, industries, and fortunes across the nation. But as coal demand plummeted, the towns that depended on it fell into decay. Since 2010, coal production has dropped by more than 75%, taking tens of thousands of steady, high-paying jobs with it. What replaced them were low-wage service jobs that rarely sustain a family. Nearly 1 in 5 residents now live below the poverty line, far higher than the national rate, and household incomes trail the rest of the country by nearly $15,000. Half of West Virginia's working-age population has left the labor force entirely, a sign not of temporary hardship, but of long-term collapse. The social consequences have been devastating. The state has the nation's highest rate of overdose deaths, with some counties reporting more than 80 deaths per 100,000 people. Addiction has gutted communities, drained billions in public resources, and fractured countless families. Meanwhile, the population continues to shrink. Over 100,000 people have left since 2010, mostly the young and educated seeking opportunity elsewhere. What remains is one of the oldest populations in America, putting enormous strain on healthcare systems and pension funds. Infrastructure reflects a decay. Roads crumble, bridges deteriorate, and basic utilities fail faster than the state can repair them. Federal aid now accounts for more than 1/3 of West Virginia's total budget. Should that lifeline tighten or another recession strike, there would be no safety net left. For many small towns, collapse isn't something looming on the horizon. It has already arrived. Mississippi tells a different version of the same national story, but the outcome is just as bleak. It ranks at or near the bottom in nearly every major economic category. With a median household income of about $48,000, more than $20,000 below the national average, families struggle to make ends meet. In some rural counties, over 1/3 of residents live in poverty, creating pockets of generational hardship where opportunity feels like a distant idea. Only about 56% of Mississippi's working-age adults participate in the labor force, the lowest rate in the country, meaning nearly half of its potential workers have given up entirely. Education mirrors the economic stagnation. Mississippi consistently ranks last in test scores and college attainment, hampered by underfunded schools and limited access to higher education. This drives young talent out of the state, deepening the cycle of decline. The state's health crisis magnifies the pain. Mississippi leads the nation in infant mortality and ranks near the bottom in life expectancy. Many rural hospitals have closed, forcing residents to travel hours for care. About 14% of Mississippians remain uninsured, leaving families one illness away from financial ruin. Infrastructure, too, is collapsing under neglect. 1 in 4 bridges is structurally deficient, and billions are needed to repair crumbling roads and failing water systems. Jackson's repeated water crises made national headlines, but they are only the most visible symptom of a statewide breakdown. More than 40% of Mississippi's budget relies on federal money, a fragile dependence that leaves the state dangerously exposed. When the next economic downturn hits, those threads could snap, triggering not a temporary recession, but a collapse of essential public services to end these places. The American promise is eroded into survival. Each number on the debt clock doesn't just measure dollars. It measures a distance between what the nation once built and what it's struggling to hold together. After the 2008 financial crash, Detroit's revival was hailed as a model of American resilience, a symbol that recovery was possible even after collapse. But beyond the downtown glow and the pockets of tech investment, Michigan's foundation remained fragile. The state still leans heavily on manufacturing, especially the auto industry, which accounts for nearly one-fifth of its GDP. That concentration of risk makes the economy vulnerable to global supply disruptions or sudden drops in car demand. When the auto industry shakes, Michigan trembles. Beneath the surface, household finances reveal how uneven and unstable the recovery truly is. Nearly half of Michigan residents struggle with overdue bills, medical debt, or rising living costs. Poverty remains widespread, especially in Detroit, where some neighborhoods still report rates above 30%. Since 2020, more than 100,000 people have left the state, draining tax revenue and accelerating demographic decline. Those who remain are often older, poorer, and more dependent on public services that are already stretched thin. Entire neighborhoods in Detroit stand half empty, 1 in 5 homes vacant, many others collapsing after years of neglect. Infrastructure tells a similar story of decline. Michigan's roads consistently rank among the worst in the nation, with nearly half classified as being in poor condition. The state needs billions in annual repairs just to keep up with deterioration. The water crisis that once exposed the tragedy of Flint never fully disappeared. Across the state, communities still face lead contamination, aging pipes, and outdated sewage systems that overflow during major storms, threatening both health and environment. Healthcare and addiction compound these economic struggles. The opioid crisis has doubled overdose deaths in the past decade, tearing through both rural towns and urban centers. Hospital closures in less populated regions leave tens of thousands without nearby access to medical care. The result is an increasingly fragile public health system that mirrors a broader economic instability. Michigan's economy remains a high-risk balancing act, overly reliant on an industry that could collapse overnight. If global demand shifts, electric vehicle adoption accelerates, or automation cuts deeper into manufacturing, the state could again face the kind of mass layoffs and foreclosures that defined 2008. Without true diversification, Michigan's fragile recovery could shatter into another industrial collapse. That Alabama's challenges are different but equally severe. Behind its cultural pride, deep traditions, and strong community identity lies an economy struggling to stay afloat. The median household income hovers around $59,000, among the lowest in the nation, and nearly 16% of residents live below the poverty line. That means more than 750,000 people are fighting daily just to make ends meet. The state's education system remains one of its biggest obstacles to growth. Chronic underfunding, teacher shortages, and persistently low graduation rates have pushed Alabama near the bottom of national rankings. Only about a quarter of adults hold a bachelor's degree, limiting access to higher-paying jobs and driving many young professionals to leave the state in search of opportunity elsewhere. The result is a steady brain drain that weakens the long-term economic base and stifles innovation. Healthcare is another breaking point. By refusing to expand Medicaid, Alabama left roughly 300,000 residents without affordable insurance. More than 15 rural hospitals have shut down since 2010, leaving large regions without access to emergency care. Infant mortality rates remain among the highest in the country, and overall life expectancy lags several years behind the national average. The state's limited healthcare access not only endangers lives, but also detains new businesses and workers from settling. Their infrastructure failures deepen the crisis. Engineers have rated over 16% of Alabama's bridges as structurally deficient. Many rural communities still lack reliable broadband, cutting them off from modern commerce, remote work, and education opportunities. The state's budget has virtually no reserves, meaning even a mild recession could trigger immediate cuts to critical services like education, healthcare, and public safety. Heavy dependence on a few major industries, automotive, aerospace, and agriculture, leaves Alabama dangerously exposed to global market swings. A single downturn in exports or production could unleash mass layoffs, forcing schools to close early, hospitals to reduce services, and towns to slash essential programs. The cracks in Alabama's economy are widening, and another major economic shock could turn those fractures into full collapse. Arkansas faces a quieter but equally troubling crisis. It doesn't often make national headlines, but the decline is steady and severe. The state's median household income hovers around $53,000, one of the lowest in the country, and roughly 15% of residents live in poverty. Rural communities bear the heaviest burden, places where local businesses have vanished, healthcare access has dried up, and stable jobs are scarce. Healthcare gaps are particularly severe. Over 200,000 Arkansans remain uninsured, and many must travel hours to reach the nearest hospital or specialist. Since 2010, at least 10 rural hospitals have closed, leaving entire regions dangerously unprepared for emergencies. The financial strain pushes many families into debt, with medical bills ranking among the leading causes of bankruptcy statewide. Education adds another layer to the problem. Only about 1 in 4 adults holds a college degree, and rural schools often operate in outdated buildings with limited programs and ongoing teacher shortages. This lack of educational opportunity makes it harder to attract or build modern industries. Walmart, headquartered in Bentonville, remains the state's largest private employer, an economic anchor, but also a warning sign. As automation advances, even those retail and logistics jobs are increasingly at risk across Michigan, Alabama, and Arkansas. The details differ, but the pattern is the same. Fragile economies held together by aging infrastructure, shrinking workforces, and over-reliance on a few dominant industries. Each stands one downturn away from discovering just how thin America's margin for recovery has become. Manufacturing and agriculture remain essential to Arkansas's economy, but both are unstable, vulnerable to global price swings, trade disputes, and shifting demand. The state's infrastructure mirrors years of neglect. Nearly 40% of rural residents lack reliable broadband, a modern necessity as critical as electricity. Roads and bridges require billions in repairs, yet Arkansas operates on a tight budget that depends heavily on federal aid. Nearly half of its revenue comes from Washington, leaving the state deeply tied to national spending decisions it cannot control. Kentucky offers one of the clearest pictures of what happens when an economy built on a single industry collapses. For generations, coal shaped its identity, fueling towns, jobs, and local pride. But as coal production plunged by more than 60% after 2010, entire regions lost their economic backbone. Eastern Kentucky, once alive with mining, now suffers unemployment rates far above the national average. Families that once relied on steady union paychecks are now struggling to survive on low-wage service jobs or government assistance. Nearly 1 in